Listen close, friend. What I'm about to tell you happened a year ago, but I still feel the chill of those words in my chest like it was yesterday. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I'd worked all day in the coffee warehouse, hauling sacks of green coffee, reviewing accounts with the importers down in New Orleans. My hands smelled of fine Arabica the way they've smelled for the last 40 years. My name is Elijah Vance. I'm 72 years old. And that afternoon, I was dog-tired. I'd just gotten back to my little house in central Harlem. You know the neighborhood, right? Narrow streets, houses squeezed together, the scent of barbecue smoke, and the rumble of the trains that never stop. My house is small, just 2 rooms, but it's mine. I bought it 30 years ago, dime by dime, without borrowing a cent from anybody. The walls are painted sky blue, just like my Lucille, rest her soul, like them. I was kicking off my work boots, those brown leather ones I've worn for 10 years, still good, though a little worn down, when the phone rang. That old, black rotary phone I installed in the kitchen back in 1995. I don't have one of those fancy cell phones. What do I need it for? Nobody calls me except Alexander, my grandson, and Chloe, my niece. Hearing it ring made my heart lift. I thought, surely that's Alexander calling to talk about the wedding? I hadn't heard from him in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, without a call, without a visit. I understood he was busy with the preparations. Getting married isn't easy, especially at a place like the Plaza Hotel. But I missed him, brother. I missed our Sunday talks when he'd come over to eat and tell me about his architecture projects. I ran to the phone like a kid. Me, at 72, I ran. "Hello?" I said, trying not to sound too eager. "Grandpa," he said. His voice sounded strange, cold, nervous, like when he was a boy and had gotten into trouble at school. "How are you?" "Good, my boy. Still working hard, as always. And you? Is everything ready for Saturday?" There was a long silence. Too long, I stood there in the kitchen, still in my sweaty work shirt, waiting for him to mention the invitation. Because, truthfully, friend, I already had my one good shirt ready. The white one I bought 5 years ago for my best friend Robert's funeral. I'd already taken it to the dry cleaner and everything. "Grandpa, that's what I wanted to talk about. About the wedding." My heart jumped. "Well, it's about time, son. Tell me what time I need to be there, and if you want me to bring anything." "No, Grandpa. Wait. Let me explain something." His tone turned even colder, as if he were talking to a stranger, not to the grandfather who raised him after his parents were killed in that accident on Interstate 80 in New Jersey. "The thing's, Grandpa, Vanessa's family is, how do I explain it? Very exclusive, very high class. The ceremony is going to be in the Plaza's garden. Up in Midtown. It's going to be nothing but important business owners, politicians, very wealthy people." I was still standing in my kitchen, looking at the table where we'd eaten breakfast so many times together, the wooden table I built myself when he was 15 because I wanted us to have a nice place to eat. He kept talking. "I just thought maybe you'd feel uncomfortable being there, with all those people who are so different on another level." That's when I started to feel something strange in my stomach, like when you eat something spoiled. "What are you talking about, Alexander? I'm your grandfather. Why would I be uncomfortable?" Another silence, this one longer. I could hear his nervous breathing on the other end of the line. "Look, Grandpa, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you the truth. because I love you very much, and I don't want you to get hurt. Those words, brother. When someone tells you, I'm going to tell you the truth because I love you very much, you better brace yourself, because what's coming is going to sting. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed of you. My heart stopped. Just like that. It stopped. Embarrassed? Embarrassed of what, son? Of everything, Grandpa. Of your old clothes. Of your house. Of the coffee smell you always carry on you. Of your calloused hands. Of the fact that you don't speak French. Of how you don't know about vintage wines or the things that educated people talk about. Each word was like a punch, but he kept talking, as if he couldn't stop. Vanessa and her family think my family has money, that I come from important people. If they see you there, they'll know the truth. They'll know I come from this. From Harlem, from the coffee warehouse, from poverty. Poverty? I said. Poverty? Alexander? The poverty that paid for your private school? The poverty that bought your first computer? The poverty that gave you the down payment for your apartment? It's not the same, Grandpa. That was then. I'm an architect now. I work for the most important firm in the city. I have a different life now. I stayed silent. For a long time, I looked at the pictures on the kitchen wall. There he was as a baby when he was orphaned. And I brought him to live with me after my Lucille died. There he was at his high school graduation, in his cap and gown, smiling with his arm around my neck. There he was on his 25th birthday, telling me I was his hero. Please, Grandpa, try to understand me. I don't want you to come to the wedding. I'll send you pictures later. Lots of nice pictures. You don't want me to come to your wedding? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, Grandpa, I don't. I sat down in the kitchen chair, that white plastic chair I bought at the flea market 10 years ago. My legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. And one more thing, Grandpa. I'm going to ask you another favor. Don't call me on this number anymore. Sometimes Vanessa's office secretary answers. And if she hears someone calling me from a number like that, from one of those old phones, she might think strange things. That my family is, humble folk. Humble folk. That word sounded like an insult coming from his mouth. And what's wrong with being humble folk, son? Nothing, Grandpa, and nothing's wrong with it, but not for people like Vanessa. She's used to something else. The first tears escaped me. I couldn't stop them. 72 years old, and I was crying like a small child. Do you remember, Alexander, when your mom and dad died in that accident? Do you remember you were 8 years old and you were left all alone in the world? Yes, Grandpa, I remember. Do you remember that I sold my truck so I could afford the Dalton School? Do you remember I walked 2 hours every day to take you to school because I didn't have transportation anymore? Yes, I remember. Do you remember I worked double shifts for 5 years to pay for your university? That I ate beans and cornbread all week so I could give you money for your books? Grandpa, please don't make me feel bad. Make you feel bad? Am I making you feel bad? Or are you feeling bad all on your own? He didn't answer. He just breathed heavily on the other end. Do you remember you used to tell me that when you grew up, you were going to be like me? That you were going to work hard and be honest like your grandpa? People change, Grandpa. Yes, son, people change. But I didn't know they could change so much. There was another silence, long as a century. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I really am sorry. But it's my decision. It's my life. You're right, my boy. It is your life and your decision. I hung up the phone slowly, as if it were made of glass and might shatter. I stayed seated there in my kitchen, looking at the photos on the wall, looking at that table where we'd eaten breakfast so many times together, looking at my hands, those calloused hands he was ashamed of, which had worked 40 years to give him a future. The phone stayed silent. The house stayed silent. And I stayed seated there, understanding that the grandson I raised, the boy I loved like a son, was dead. In his place was a stranger who was ashamed of me. I didn't eat dinner that night. I couldn't. I just stayed there, looking at the photos, remembering when he called me Grandpa with affection, not with that coldness of an important man who no longer wants to know about his past. I couldn't sleep that night, brother, or the 6 nights that followed. I lay there in my bed, the bed where I slept with my Lucille for 30 years, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been emptied out inside. It was as if someone had taken everything I believed to be true in this world and thrown it in the trash. You know what hurt the most? It wasn't just the ingratitude. It was remembering everything we'd lived through together, everything that boy had meant to me. Because look, when life takes your wife, and then it takes your son and daughter-in-law in one blow, and leaves you with an 8-year-old grandson who cries every night because he doesn't understand why his parents aren't coming back, well, that child becomes your entire world. I remember perfectly the day Alexander arrived at my house. It was a Tuesday, the same as the day of that call. I had just buried my Lucille. She'd been dead for only 2 weeks, and her scent was still on the pillows. Her coffee was still in the cabinet. Her plants were already drying out because I didn't know how to care for them. And suddenly, they brought me this skinny little boy with red eyes from crying so much, carrying a blue suitcase his mom had bought him for a vacation that would never come. "Are you going to stay with me, Grandpa?" he asked that first night when I tucked him into the room that had been his father's when he was a boy. "You won't ever leave me alone?" "I'll never leave you alone, my boy," I told him. Never. And I kept my word, didn't I? For 14 years, I kept my word. The first months were the hardest. I knew nothing about raising children. My Lucille had always handled that with our Robert. I didn't know how to make him the breakfast he liked, how to help him with homework, how to explain to him why life is sometimes so cruel that it takes the people you love most from you overnight. But I learned, brother. Lord, did I learn. I got up every morning at 5 a.m. for 8 years to make his lunch, to iron his school uniform, to comb his hair the way he liked. I learned to make pancakes because that's all he wanted for Sunday breakfast. I learned to help him with math, even though I only finished the 3rd grade. And when he turned 10, he told me he wanted a computer like his friend Patrick had, who went to some expensive school up in the Upper East Side. I didn't even know what a computer was, but I saw how his eyes lit up when he told me about the games he could play, the things he could learn. That computer cost $3,000. $3,000, friend. For you, who live in a different world, maybe it doesn't sound like much, but for me back then it was like he was asking for the moon. I only earned $300 a week at the warehouse, working from sunup to sundown, hauling coffee sacks. You know what I did? I sold my TV, my radio, my fan, everything of value I had in the house. And it wasn't enough. Then I sold my watch, that gold watch my father gave me when I married Lucille. My dad was already dead, and that watch was the only thing I had left of him. But when I saw the look of happiness on Alexander's face when I told him I would buy his computer. I knew I'd done the right thing. Seriously, Grandpa? You're really going to buy it for me? Seriously, my boy? But you have to promise me you'll use it to study, not just to play. And he did. He used it to study. That boy was smart as could be. In middle school, he was getting straight A's, and his teachers told me he had a bright future, that he could go far if he kept studying. That's why, when it was time to choose a high school, I didn't hesitate for a second to enroll him in the Dalton School, the most expensive and best school in all of New York City. It cost $1,000 a month, $1,000 I didn't have. But I was going to find it. No matter what, I started working double shifts. I got up at 4 in the morning to unload trucks at the Fulton Fish Market, and then I rushed over to the coffee warehouse until 8 at night. On weekends, I worked as a security guard at a construction site. I slept 4 hours a day, but every month I had that $1,000 for his school. And it was worth it, brother. Lord, it was worth it. Alexander was the pride of that school. He won, I don't know how many math and science competitions. In his second year of high school, he told me he wanted to study architecture at NYU. He wanted to design beautiful buildings. He wanted to be someone important. Someone important? I told him. You're already someone important to me, my boy. No, Grandpa, I mean truly important. Like the rich gentleman in the magazines. I want to have an office in a skyscraper. I want to drive a new car. I want to live in a big house up in the Upper East Side. I remember feeling a little sad hearing him talk like that, but I was also proud that he had such big dreams. My grandson was going to be an architect. My grandson was going to get out of Harlem and see another world. When he graduated from high school, I cried like a baby at that ceremony. There he was, my little Alexander, in his blue gown and cap, the best-looking one of all. The teachers congratulated me. They told me I was an exemplary grandfather, that I had raised an exceptional young man. That night we had dinner at a restaurant. Not too expensive, but nice. He ordered a steak, and I ordered chicken because it was cheaper. But I pretended it was what I was craving. He was so happy that I even had a beer, which I almost never did. Grandpa, he told me that night, when I'm a famous architect, I'll buy you a big house with a yard and everything, so you don't have to work anymore. I don't need a big house, my boy. I just need you to be happy. You'll see, Grandpa. You're going to be proud of me. I'm going to be the best architect in all of New York. University was even more expensive than high school. Not just the tuition, but also the little apartment I rented for him near NYU so he wouldn't have to wake up so early. $1,600 a month just for rent, plus food, plus books, plus everything a college student needed. Where was I supposed to get an extra $1,600 every month? Well, by selling everything I could sell. First, I sold my car, that old but reliable sedan that had lasted me 15 years. Then I sold my father's tools, which I had kept like a treasure for 20 years. Then I sold the good furniture in the living room, the pieces my Lucille had bought when we got married. But I didn't care, brother. Every dollar I spent on him was an investment in the future, my future, his future, the future of our family. On Sundays, he would come home for lunch. They were the happiest days of my week. I'd get up on Saturday night to prepare the smoked brisket and collard greens, following the recipe my Lucille had learned from her mother down in Georgia. I'd add the vinegar, the sugar, the spices, everything my boy liked. "Smells amazing, Grandpa," he'd yell from the door. "I'm starving." We'd sit at that wooden table I built myself, and he'd tell me about his classes, his professors, The buildings he was learning to design, he'd show me his drawings. Lord, he drew such beautiful things. Houses that looked like they belonged in a magazine, tall buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. This is going to be my first project when I graduate, he'd say, showing me a drawing of an office tower. Do you like it? I love it, my boy. But I love seeing you so excited even more. After lunch, he'd stay a little longer. He'd help me wash the dishes. We'd watch TV together. Sometimes he'd ask about his dad, his mom, about my Lucille. I'd tell him stories about when they were young, how they met, how proud they would have been of him. Do you think my dad would be proud of me, Grandpa? Terribly proud, son. Just like me. Those Sundays were my whole life, brother. From Monday to Saturday, I worked just to get to Sunday, to hear his laughter, to see him eat with gusto, to listen to his dreams. But things started to change when he met Vanessa. It was at a university party, he told me. A beautiful girl, the daughter of a wealthy family who owned a chain of upscale restaurants in Midtown. At first, I was happy. My grandson had a girlfriend. He would get married someday. He would give me great-grandchildren. But little by little, the Sundays grew further apart. I can't come this Sunday, Grandpa. I have lunch with Vanessa's family. I can't go. I have to escort Vanessa to a wedding. I can't go. I'm too busy with a project. The calls changed, too. Before, he'd call me 2 or 3 times a week just to chat. Then he started calling only when he needed money. Grandpa, can you lend me some money for a suit? I have an important job interview. Grandpa, can you help me with this month's rent? I spent a lot on Vanessa's birthday gift. Grandpa, can you lend me money for the engagement ring? I found a perfect one, but it's a little expensive. And I always said yes. Always. Even if I had to sell something else. Even if I had to work extra shifts. Even if I had to eat beans all week. Because he was my grandson. Because I loved him. Because I thought he was just going through a rough patch. The day I ran into him downtown was 3 months ago. I was coming out of the hardware store where I had bought some bolts to fix a warehouse door. I was wearing my work clothes, my old but clean denim pants, my blue plaid shirt, my brown boots. I was walking down Fifth Avenue when I saw them coming out of Saks. He was wearing a gray suit I didn't recognize. It looked expensive, elegant. She was wearing a white dress, a designer bag, shoes that shined. They looked like they were out of a magazine, like the rich people you see in the soap operas. Alexander! I yelled, and I ran toward him, as if running into him was a blessing from heaven. But when he saw me, his face changed. He looked nervous, scared. He greeted me, but coldly, as if I were just an acquaintance. Vanessa, he said to her, I'd like you to meet Esteban. He's a distant relative. Distant relative? Those words hurt more than a punch to the stomach. Vanessa looked me up and down. She saw my worn boots, my old pants, my calloused hands that smelled of coffee. She extended her hand as if she were about to touch something dirty. She gave me that fake smile, that well-bred people give when they don't want to be there. Nice to meet you, she said. But she was already turning away. Well, we have to go, Alexander said. We have an important appointment. And they left. I watched them walk down Fifth Avenue as if they owned the world, and I stood there like a fool, feeling like something inside me had shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep well either. I kept thinking about that phrase, distant relative, as if I weren't the man who had raised him since he was 8 years old. As if I weren't the one who had sold everything he owned to give him a career. As if I were a stranger who had accidentally crossed his path. Now, lying in bed after that horrible call, All of it came flooding back to my mind like a movie. Every dollar I had spent on him, every night I'd worked extra to pay for his school, every Sunday I'd cooked brisket, waiting for him to arrive. Every time I had to choose between buying medicine for my back pain or giving him money for his expenses. And in the end, after all that, I had become his shame, something he had to hide, a distant relative who smelled of coffee and had dirty hands. Those were the longest nights of my life, brother, longer than when my Lucille died, longer than when I buried my son. Because when someone you love dies, it hurts, but you know they loved you too. But when someone you love tells you they are ashamed of you, it's like they kill your soul slowly. On the fourth day after that call, brother, I made the decision that changed everything. I was sitting in my small office above the coffee warehouse, that small room where I keep my old wooden desk, my filing cabinets full of yellowed invoices, my photos with the farmers from Guatemala from when I started the business 47 years ago. The smell of Arabica coffee filled the air. That smell that Alexander said he was ashamed of. That smell that for me was the perfume of honest work. I sat there for a long time, looking out the dirty window that faced the street, watching the people of Harlem pass by with their grocery bags, their kids running, their simple but dignified lives. And that's when I understood, crystal clear, it was time to teach my grandson what dignity really costs. I picked up the phone and called Rodrigo Navarro, my lawyer. This man had been working with me for 20 years, ever since I started growing the business, and needed someone to help me with contracts. Rodrigo is a good, honest man, the kind that's rare these days, the son of farmers, just like me. But he studied law by working as a waiter at night. Rodrigo, I said, I need you to come to the warehouse today, and bring Carlos too. Carlos is my accountant, a skinny young man who has been with me for 15 years. I taught him the coffee business right out of college. I watched him grow, get married, have his children. He's always been loyal to me, like family. They arrived around 3 in the afternoon. They sat in the 2 plastic chairs I have in front of my desk. I don't have fancy furniture, but I've always kept things clean and organized. What's wrong, Mr. Vance? Rodrigo asked me. You sound serious on the phone. It is serious, friend. Very serious. Do you remember that offer from Global Coffee Industries? The one we've been rejecting all year? Carlos straightened up in his chair. He had been the one who brought me the first proposal 12 months ago. An American company that wanted to buy Mexican coffee companies to expand into Latin America. The $12 million one? Carlos asked. The one you said you would never accept because this company was your life? That very one. Well, it turns out it's not my life anymore. Not anymore. They both looked at me as if I'd gone crazy. And maybe I had gone crazy, brother. But it was a sane craziness. A craziness that made perfect sense in my head. Mr. Vance, Rodrigo said, explain to me what happened. Are you sick? Do you need money for something? I told them everything. Friend. Everything. About Alexander's call. Everything he had said. All of it about the shame and the old clothes and the smell of coffee. I told them, as if I were confessing, my voice choked but firm. Rodrigo shook his head back and forth, as if saying he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Carlos's eyes were watery. That boy was always sentimental, and he also knew Alexander well from when he used to come to the warehouse as a child. That boy is crazy, Rodrigo said when I finished telling the story. Completely crazy. After everything you did for him. He's not crazy, Rodrigo. He's lost. Lost in a world that taught him that expensive clothes are worth more than a good heart. But I'm going to teach him something he forgot. What's that, Mr. Vance? I'm going to teach him what dignity really costs. Then I explained my plan. First, sell the entire company to Global Coffee Industries for the $12 million they offered. Second, draw up a new will, leaving all that money to Chloe, my niece, the daughter of my brother Manuel, who died of diabetes 5 years ago. To Chloe? Carlos asked. The teacher? To Chloe, the only person in my family who has visited me every week for the last 8 years. The only one who remembered my birthday last year. The only one who comes and helps me clean the house, brings me medicine when my back hurts, sits with me to watch the afternoon shows. Chloe. Oh, my dear Chloe, 35 years old, single, a primary school teacher in a government school out in the outer boroughs. She earns a pittance, maybe $1,800 a month, but she has the biggest heart I've ever known, besides my Lucille's. Every Sunday, she shows up at my house with a bag of pastries and a smile that lights up my whole week. Listen, Mr. Vance, Rodrigo said, don't get me wrong. Chloe is a wonderful girl. But are you sure you want to leave everything to her? Alexander, for all his foolishness, is still your grandson. Rodrigo, my grandson died last Tuesday when he told me he was ashamed of me. The one who's getting married on Saturday is a stranger who carries his name, but not his heart. They both fell silent. Rodrigo took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, the way he does when he's thinking something very serious. Carlos just looked at his hands as if he'd find the right words there. And when do you want all this done? Rodrigo finally asked. Tomorrow. Everything tomorrow. The sale papers, the new will, everything. I want it ready before Saturday, before the wedding. Carlos lifted his head. Mr. Vance, may I ask you something? Tell me, son. Are you going to the wedding? I was silent for a moment. Outside, I could hear the noise of the trucks unloading merchandise, the voices of the workers, the everyday life going on. Yes, Carlos, I'm going. But how? If he told you not to go? He told the poor Esteban not to go, the one who smells of coffee, the one who wears old clothes. But he didn't tell Esteban, the businessman, not to go. Rodrigo adjusted his glasses. I don't understand. Tomorrow, after we sign all the papers, you're both going to come shopping with me. I haven't bought new clothes in 40 years. Just the necessities. The cheap, practical stuff. But tomorrow I'm going to buy a suit. A suit like the ones the people from Midtown wear. A suit that will teach my grandson what class truly means. The next day, they arrived early, around 8 in the morning. They carried a briefcase full of papers, sales contracts, will documents, everything legal I needed to change my life in one day. The people from Global Coffee Industries came around 10. 3 white men in gray suits who spoke Spanish with a strange accent, but carried a check that looked like something out of a movie. $12 million for Dawn's Coffee Roasters, the company I started in 1978 with a hand cart and $200 my friend Aurelio lent me. Mr. Vance, the boss of the group, told me, we are very excited to acquire your company. You have built something really special here. Yes, I replied in my broken English. Very special. 47 years of work. I signed the papers one by one. Each signature was like saying goodbye to a small piece of my soul. But it was also like lifting a weight off my shoulders. The warehouse, where I had spent half my life, was no longer mine. The contracts with the farmers who had sold me their coffee for decades were no longer mine. The little office where I had made the most important decisions of my life was no longer mine. But I was free, brother. Free like I had never been before. After the will paperwork, everything to Chloe, down to the last penny. We went to the Westchester Mall. Rodrigo drove his car. Carlos sat in the front with me, and I watched the city change through the window. From Harlem, with its narrow streets and food stalls, to the wide avenues and shining buildings of the suburbs. "Which store do you want to go into, Mr. Vance?" Rodrigo asked me when we reached the mall. "The most expensive one there is." We walked into Hugo Boss. I had never set foot in a store like that in my life. Everything gleamed. It smelled of expensive cologne. The music was soft, like in a fancy hotel. The salespeople wore suits that cost more than my rent for 3 months. "How can I help you?" a well-dressed young woman asked us. But I saw in her eyes that she was sizing us up, calculating if we could actually afford anything in there. "I need a suit," I told her. "The best you have." I tried on about 5 before finding the perfect one. Navy blue, a perfect cut, fabric that felt like silk between my fingers. $1,000 plus a white shirt for $150, plus a silk tie for $200, plus Italian shoes for $400, $1,750 worth of clothes, more than I had spent on clothes in 10 years. But when I looked at myself in the full-length mirror, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was me, but it wasn't me. It was an elegant, distinguished gentleman, the kind who appears in business magazines, the same old Elijah, but dressed in the dreams I had never allowed myself to have. "You look great, Mr. Vance," Carlos told me. "Very, very important." "Important," I repeated, remembering when Alexander told me he wanted to be someone important. "Yes, son. Very important." Then we went to an expensive barber shop. The gentleman who attended to me was an artist. He cut my hair, trimmed my beard, put on some kind of creams that left my face baby smooth. Another $200. But it was worth every cent. Back in the car, returning to Harlem, Rodrigo asked me, "And now what, Mr. Vance? Have you planned what you're going to do at the wedding?" "I have an idea, friend. An idea I hope my grandson never forgets." That night, I stayed up very late, practicing what I was going to say in front of the mirror, trying on the suit again, practicing how to walk like an important gentleman, like those business owners Alexander admired so much. And for the first time in a week, brother, I slept peacefully. Not because the pain in my heart was gone, it still hurt like the first day, but because I knew that the next day, at that elegant wedding, at the Plaza Hotel, my grandson was going to learn the most important lesson of his life. He was going to learn that dignity can't be bought with expensive clothes, but sometimes you need expensive clothes for people to listen when you talk about dignity. Imagine it, brother. The garden at the Plaza, that Saturday in June, was like a piece of heaven transplanted to earth. Fountains with crystal clear water shining under the sun. White roses everywhere that smelled like glory. Round tables with silk tablecloths that cost more than my rent for a month. 200 guests, all dressed as if they were going to meet the president. The ladies in gowns that surely cost what I earned in 6 months. The gentlemen with watches that sparkled like stars. Children who looked like magazine dolls in their perfect little suits. And there he was, my Alexander, standing next to the makeshift altar under a flower-covered pergola. He wore a black tuxedo that I knew had cost $3,000. "I borrowed it for a special occasion," he had told me. He looked handsome, elegant, like a storybook prince. But when I looked at him, I no longer saw the boy who cried in my arms when he had nightmares. I saw a stranger who wore his face but not his heart. Vanessa was radiant in her gown, which I later learned cost $15,000, white as snow. with lace that seemed made by angels. A train so long that it needed two little girls to carry it. She looked like a Disney princess, smiling for photos, greeting the guests as if she were the queen of the world. Her parents, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Meredith Sinclair, received congratulations like true royalty. He, in his Italian suit and his Rolex watch, which shone every time he moved his hand. She, in a navy blue dress that surely cost more than my house, and jewels that looked like they were taken from a museum. It was obvious they were used to being the center of attention, to people treating them with reverence. The ceremony was like a movie, brother. A priest who spoke beautifully, music from a string quartet that sounded like angels, words of love floating in the perfumed air. Alexander said his vows with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Vanessa cried perfect tears that didn't ruin her makeup. The guests sighed at the right moments. They applauded when they kissed. They threw rose petals as they walked toward the reception hall. I watched them from the hotel entrance, hidden behind a column like a thief. I was wearing my new suit, my perfect white shirt, my silk tie, my shoes that shone like mirrors. I'd had my hair done at an expensive barbershop. I'd shaved until I was baby smooth. When I looked at myself in the hotel window panes, I couldn't believe it was me. I looked like one of those important business owners who appear in magazines, one of those gentlemen Alexander admired so much. Rodrigo was with me, clutching his briefcase full of documents. He looked nervous. He was sweating a little, despite the hotel's air conditioning. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Vance?" he asked me for the 10th time. "Once we walk in there, there's no turning back." "Rodrigo, I've been thinking about this for a week. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And what if it gets violent? What if the girl's parents call security?" "They won't call anyone, friend. Rich people hate public scandals more than anything else. They'll listen to what I have to say." We waited until the ceremony ended, until everyone was inside the hall toasting with French champagne that cost more per bottle than my weekly salary. The sound of the string quartet reached us, mixed with elegant laughter and conversations in that refined tone that wealthy people use. "It's time," I told Rodrigo. We walked toward the entrance of the hall. The maitre d', an older man in an impeccable suit, saw us approach. His gaze swept over me, the expensive suit, the shining shoes, the posture of a man accustomed to respect. "Good evening, sir. Your invitation?" "I am the groom's grandfather," I told him with a calm smile. "Elijah Vance." The man consulted a list, frowned. "Excuse me, sir, but your name does not appear here." "It's a surprise," I explained. "A special surprise for my grandson." My suit, my manners, my way of speaking convinced him. He gave me a small bow and let us pass. "Of course, Mr. Vance. Please enjoy the celebration." The hall was more impressive inside than out. Crystal chandeliers that looked like cascades of diamonds, flowers everywhere perfuming the air, tables decorated like altars. The guests were conversing in groups, all with their champagne flutes, all laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, but that had to be celebrated because the right people were telling them. Alexander was at the head table with Vanessa, receiving congratulations. She held his hand and smiled like a queen. He toasted with every person who approached. They looked happy, perfect, like a wedding postcard from a magazine. I started walking through the hall slowly, without rushing. Some guests turned in to look at me. My suit was as elegant as anyone else's there. My posture was as dignified as the most important business owners. But no one recognized me. How could they recognize the old Elijah from the coffee warehouse in this distinguished gentleman? Rodrigo walked behind me, clutching his briefcase as if it were a treasure. I could feel his nervousness, but I was calm as a lake at dawn. I had waited a week for this moment. I had planned every word, every gesture. Little by little, the conversations faded. People noticed that someone was walking with purpose through the hall. Someone who clearly had something important to do. Murmurs began to follow me like a wave. When I got close to the head table, Alexander looked up. His eyes met mine, and I saw how his face changed. First confusion, then recognition. Finally, pure terror. The champagne glass he held in his hand began to tremble. "My God," he whispered, and the glass slipped from his fingers. The crystal shattered against the floor with a sound that echoed through the entire hall like a gunshot. Vanessa looked at him strangely. "What is it, honey? Who is that man?" Alexander couldn't answer. He had gone white as his shirt. His hands were shaking like leaves in a gale. Everyone at the head table turned to look at me, trying to understand why the groom seemed to have seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said, in a clear, strong voice that reached every corner of the hall. "Excuse the interruption." The string quartet stopped playing. The conversations died out like blown-out candles. 200 people were looking at me, waiting to know who this elegant man was who had provoked such a reaction from the groom. "Could I borrow the microphone for a moment?" I asked the master of ceremonies, a young man in a shiny suit who was standing next to the head table. "I'd like to say a few words." The young man looked at Alexander, seeking his approval, but my grandson couldn't even speak. His mouth was open like a fish out of water, his eyes fixed on me as if he were seeing the devil himself. Mr. Richard Sinclair, Vanessa's father, stood up from his chair. "Excuse me, sir. Who are you? This is a private celebration." "Of course it's private," I replied with a courteous smile. "That's why I want to introduce myself properly." I took the microphone from the master of ceremonies' hands. The weight felt strange in my hand. I had never used one of those modern devices, but I knew exactly what I had to say. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I began, and my voice came out clear and strong through the speakers. "My name is Elijah Vance. I'm the groom's grandfather." A murmur ran through the hall like wind through the leaves. Some guests looked at each other, confused. Others turned toward Alexander, who remained paralyzed in his chair. "I know my presence here surprises you," I continued, "especially since Alexander specifically asked me not to come to his wedding." The murmur turned into complete silence. Not a single glass clinked. Not a single chair creaked. Even the waiters had frozen like statues with trays in their hands. My grandson told me he was ashamed of me. He said my old clothes, my humble house, and my hands that smell of coffee were an embarrassment to him and his new family. Mrs. Meredith Sinclair placed a hand on her chest as if she were feeling pain. Mr. Sinclair frowned, looking at Alexander with a mixture of confusion and disgust. Vanessa had turned so pale she looked like she might faint. "But I came anyway," I continued, "because I wanted to give the bride and groom a wedding gift." I reached into my suit jacket and took out the envelope I had prepared. A simple white envelope that contained 5 $20 bills, $100 total. "Alexander, Vanessa," I said, walking toward their table, "I give you this." I placed the envelope on the table, right between their fine china plates. The envelope looked ridiculously small amidst all that luxury, like an ant in a palace. Some guests let out nervous titters. Others looked at each other, trying to understand what was happening. A $100 gift at a wedding that had cost $500,000 made no sense. Vanessa looked at the envelope as if it were a dead cockroach. Her face had gone from paleness to the bright red of humiliation. "What? What is this?" she murmured. "It's all my grandson deserves from me," I replied. "But wait, please. I'm not finished yet." I signaled to Rodrigo, who approached with his briefcase. He opened it with precise movements and pulled out a pile of perfectly organized documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodrigo said in a clear voice, "my name is Rodrigo Navarro. I am a licensed attorney. I have come to attest to some facts that I believe are important for you to know." The silence in the hall was so deep that I could hear my own heart beating. Rodrigo unfolded the first document. "Mr. Elijah Vance," he read, "is the sole proprietor of Don's Coffee Roasters, LLC, established in 1978. The company maintains commercial contracts with 47 coffee producers in the states of Guatemala, Brazil, and Colombia, and distributes specialty coffee to more than 200 establishments throughout the United States." The murmurs started again. Some guests straightened up in their chairs, paying closer attention. Mr. Richard Sinclair frowned deeper, trying to understand where all this was going. Rodrigo continued. "Last Wednesday, June 18th of this year, Mr. Vance sold all the shares of his company to Global Coffee Industries for the amount of $12 million. It was as if a bomb had exploded in the hall. Conversations erupted everywhere. Guests turned to each other, repeating the figure in voices of astonishment. $12 million? The boy's grandfather? Alexander grabbed the edge of the table, as if he were drowning. His face had gone from white to green, as if he were about to vomit right there on his porcelain plate. Vanessa looked at him with eyes so wide that the window looked like saucers. "Furthermore," Rodrigo continued reading, raising his voice over the murmurs, "Mr. Vance granted a will. Yesterday, Thursday, June 19th, before the public notary in New York City. In said will, he bequeaths the entirety of his assets, including the proceeds from the aforementioned sale, to his niece, Chloe Vance Hernandez." This time, the silence that followed was different. It wasn't one of anticipation, but of pure shock. Like when lightning strikes, and for a moment everyone is speechless, processing what just happened. Mr. Richard Sinclair slowly rose from his chair, looking at me with new eyes. He was no longer the important gentleman dealing with an annoying intruder. He was a businessman who had just realized he had completely underestimated his opponent. I took the microphone again. My voice came out softer now, more personal, as if I were talking with an old friend instead of addressing 200 people. "Alexander," I said, looking him directly in the eyes, "you told me you were ashamed of my old clothes. Those clothes that embarrassed you are the clothes of honest work. I bought those denim pants 10 years ago with the first money I earned when I started selling coffee to the hotels in Midtown. I wore that plaid shirt the day I signed my first big contract, the one that allowed me to send you to private school." My voice cracked a little, but I kept speaking. "These hands that smell of coffee, these calloused hands that caused you such embarrassment. They hauled thousands of sacks of coffee to pay for your university. They counted millions of beans to give you a career. They got filled with calluses so that you could have the soft hands of an architect." Alexander had tears in his eyes now, but not the tears of joy he had cried when he got married an hour earlier. They were tears of shame, of pain, of belated understanding. "That elegant suit you're wearing," I continued, "you bought it with the $3,000 you borrowed from me last month for an emergency. Your apartment in Brooklyn Heights is paid for with the $1,600 a month I've been depositing for 4 years. Your car, your computer, your entire life and built on the shameful poverty of your grandfather. Vanessa looked at Alexander with an expression I couldn't interpret. It was horror, disillusionment, fury, probably all of it mixed together. I could have left that $12 million to you, son. I could have made you truly rich, not with borrowed money, but with your own money. But you taught me your worth yourself. You taught me that you preferred to lie to your in-laws about your family than to honor the one who gave you everything. I pointed to the envelope with the $100. That gift, which made so many of you nervous, is more than you deserve. It's exactly the price of one of those photos you promised to send me so I could watch your wedding from a distance, like a stranger. I turned toward Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, who now looked at me with a mix of respect and horror. Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, your daughter has married a man who is ashamed of his roots, a man who is capable of denying the one who gave him life just to impress people who don't even know him. You decide if that is the kind of character you want in your family. Mrs. Sinclair had a hand over her mouth, as if trying to hold back the words she wanted to say. Mr. Sinclair slowly shook his head, as if he were finally understanding something that had been right in front of him all along. And to you, Vanessa, I said, looking at the bride, you married a man who lied to you about who he was, about where he came from. If he is capable of lying to you about this, what else will he be capable of lying about? The silence in the hall was so complete that I could hear the air conditioning, the ticking of the expensive watches, Alexander's heavy breathing. Chloe, I said, turning back to the microphone. My niece Chloe is waiting for me outside. She's a primary school teacher, earning $1,800 a month. She drives a 2005 Honda Civic with more than 130,000 miles on it. But Chloe visits me every week for 8 years. Chloe brings me medicine when my back hurts. Chloe sits with me to watch the soap operas and isn't ashamed for the neighbors to see her entering my little house in Harlem. Alexander tried to speak. Grandpa. But his voice came out as a strangled whisper. I am no longer your grandpa, son. Your grandpa died last Tuesday when you hung up the phone after telling me you were ashamed of me. The man standing in front of you is Mr. Elijah Vance, a retired business owner. And you are a stranger who happens to carry my last name. I handed the microphone back to the master of ceremonies and walked toward the exit of the hall. Rodrigo followed me, putting the documents back into his briefcase. Our footsteps echoed in the absolute silence, like church bells. Before reaching the door, I turned around one last time. Enjoy your party, I said, without needing the microphone, because my voice reached every corner clearly. Enjoy your life built on lies, and sleep well at night, if you can. We left the hall, leaving behind a silence that felt solid, heavy as stone. Outside, Chloe was waiting for us in her simple blue dress and her teacher's shoes, more elegant in her humility than all the people inside in their luxury. Is it done, Uncle? She asked, taking my arm. It's done, my girl. Everything is as it should be. Today, a year after that wedding, I'm sitting on the porch of my small house in Newburgh, New York, watching the sun rise over the Hudson Valley. Chloe bought me this house with part of the sale money, a simple 2-bedroom house with a little garden where I grow my tomatoes and jalapeno peppers. It's not big, it's not luxurious, but it's truly mine. Not like that company I built for 40 years for someone who ended up being ashamed of me. Do you know what the best part of this new life is, brother? The silence Not the sad silence of loneliness, but the good silence of peace. I don't have to wake up at 5 in the morning anymore to check the coffee trucks. I don't have to worry about the prices of Arabica beans or whether it will rain in Colombia. I don't have to count every penny to send it to an ungrateful grandson. Every morning, I wake up when my body tells me to, not when the alarm clock rings. I put on my old sandals, the ones I'll never change because they remind me who I am, and I go out to water the plants. My hands still smell of dirt now, of fertilizer, of green leaves, and I like it. I like it because it's the smell of work I do because I want to, not because I have to do it to support someone else. Then I prepare my morning coffee. And you know what I drink? Instant Folgers that you buy at the supermarket for $3 a jar. For 40 years, I drank the best coffee in America. Coffee that costs more per pound than what many people earn in a week. But this cheap, instant coffee tastes like heaven. Friend, it tastes like freedom. It tastes like peace. I drink it slowly, watching the hummingbirds come to my flowers, listening to the song of the birds nesting in the avocado tree. Chloe comes to visit me every Sunday, just like she did before. But now, it's different. Before, she came to take care of the poor uncle who worked like a donkey. Now, she comes to chat with the uncle who has time to listen to her, who can sit with her to watch the soap operas without thinking about pending invoices or sacks to unload. My Chloe, that girl of gold, has worked wonders with the inheritance money. She opened the Lucille Vance Foundation, named after my late wife, which helps the coffee farming communities in Guatemala. The same farmers who worked with me for decades, who sold me their coffee at a fair price when other business owners wanted to cheat them. Now, the foundation gives them microloans to improve their crops, pays for their children's school, and helps them when they get sick. Uncle, Chloe told me last Sunday, you see how Mr. Aurelio in San Cristobal was able to send his granddaughter to college? The girl is going to study agronomy to come back and help her grandfather with the coffee farm. Those words filled my heart more than all the million-dollar contracts I signed in my life. Because that money, which could have gone into the hands of an ingrate, is now building true futures. Futures for good people who know how to value opportunities. Twice a week, I go to the Dutchess County Community College. I was invited to give talks to the students who are studying business administration. At first I thought, what could an old man like me, who barely finished the 3rd grade, teach them? But it turns out I have a lot to say. I tell them how I started with a handcart and $200 borrowed. I explain to them that success is not measured by the size of your office or the brand of your car, but by whether you can sleep peacefully at night, knowing you didn't steal from anyone, that you didn't trick anyone, that you treated all your workers with respect. Professor Vance, a 20-year-old student, told me last week, but how do you know if you're doing things right? It's easy, my girl, I answered. When you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, you have to be able to smile at yourself. If you can't do that, then you're doing something wrong. Those students listen to me as if I were a sage. And maybe I am wise, but not because of the books I read, which weren't many, but because of the blows life gave me and the decisions I made when everything got hard. Now, I have time to read those books I always wanted to read, but never could. Chloe bought me a comfortable chair for the garden, and I spend my afternoons reading about American history, about biographies of men who built important things with honest work. Sometimes I read novels, I like the love stories, the ones that end well, because I've had enough sad stories in my own life. At night, I watch TV without worrying about the bills I have to pay. I watch my soap operas, my football games, my cooking shows. Sometimes Chloe stays for dinner with me, and we cook together. She teaches me new recipes. I teach her the stews my Lucille used to make. We laugh, we talk. We are a real family. And Alexander, that name still hurts. I won't lie to you. It hurts like a thorn stuck deep inside. But it's no longer a pain that keeps me awake. It's a pain I've learned to carry, like you carry all the important losses in life. 3 weeks after that wedding, my phone rang. The same black phone where I had heard his horrible words. It was him. "Hello," I answered. "Grandpa, it's me. It's Alexander." His voice sounded broken, like someone who had been crying a lot. But I was no longer the same man who melted every time he heard his grandson cry. "Alexander." "Who?" I asked him. "I don't know any Alexander." "Grandpa, please, I need to talk to you. I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain, son. You already said everything you needed to say." I hung up the phone, not with anger, not with the desire to hurt him. I just hung up, like someone closing a door that no longer needs to be opened. But the boy didn't give up. A month later, he showed up here in Newburgh. I don't know how he got my address. He probably asked Chloe. He arrived in his new car, dressed in expensive clothes, but he looked worn out, skinny, haggard, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. He knocked on my door one Saturday morning when I was watering my plants. "Grandpa," he said when I opened the door, "please, just give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes." I let him in. I offered him a glass of water. We sat down in my simple living room. He looked out of place there, like a fish out of water, surrounded by my humble furniture, my walls without expensive art, my simple life. "I was wrong," he began to say, and the tears fell like a waterfall. "I was horribly wrong, Grandpa. I was an ingrate. I was everything bad a man can be." I let him talk for half an hour. He told me that Vanessa's family had kicked him out when they found out he wouldn't inherit anything. That Vanessa filed for divorce after 3 months because her parents told her she had married a liar. That he was left alone, without a wife, without money, without a job, because the firm he worked for was also owned by the Sinclairs. "I understand everything now, Grandpa," he told me between sobs. "I understand what you did at the wedding. I understand why you had to teach me that lesson. I've learned. I swear I've learned." When he finished talking, I stayed silent for a long time. I looked at him closely, trying to find the grandson I had raised, the boy who fell asleep in my arms watching TV. "Alexander," I finally said, in a calm voice, "I'm not angry with you. Anger is for people who still have hope that things will change. I no longer have that hope with you." "What does that mean, Grandpa?" "It means you are no longer my grandson. My grandson died the day he told me he was ashamed of me. You are a stranger who happens to carry my last name, nothing more. But I can change, Grandpa. I can go back to being who I was before." "No, son, you can't. Because the person you were before was a lie. The person you are now is the truth. And the truth is that when you had to choose between money and family, you chose money." He stayed silent, crying like a small child. But I no longer felt that need to comfort him that I had felt all my life. "Go, Alexander. Go and build your life as best you can. But don't look for me again. I don't have room in my heart for someone who was ashamed of me." He left crying, and I haven't seen him since. Through the gossip from the people back in Harlem, I heard he had moved to Atlanta, that he was working at a small construction company, that he was living in a simple apartment. They say he's matured, that he no longer boasts like before. But it doesn't matter to me anymore, brother. Whether he changed or not is no longer my problem. There are wounds that leave the skin tougher when they heal, and that part no longer feels the same as before. Now, sitting in my little garden, watching my tomatoes grow, I understand something that took me 73 years to learn. Dignity can't be bought with money, but it also shouldn't be given to those who don't value it. Those old pants that embarrassed him were worth more than all the Hugo Boss suits in the world, because they were soaked with the sweat of honest work. I am free, friend, free from illusions about people who don't love you for what you can give them. Free from carrying the burden of supporting someone who isn't grateful. Free from the need to prove my love to someone who doesn't know how to receive it. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.